Everyone talks about Area 51, the alien tech, the underground bunkers, the reverse-engineered crafts, but that's the problem. Everyone talks about it, and that's exactly what they want. Because while the world stares at Nevada, the real secret lies far north, buried in the frozen silence of eastern Alaska, a place with no name, no records, no fences, just miles of untouched wilderness. And a hole, a perfectly symmetrical crater, one that doesn't show up on satellite images. I know it's real because I was stationed there. For 3 months I was part of a geological survey team under the USGS. At least, that's what they told us. We were flown in on a blacked-out aircraft, no windows, blindfolded before landing. We weren't allowed to bring cell phones, watches, or compasses. The base was temporary, collapsible structures, low profile, built directly into the side of a snow-covered ridge. But what we were studying wasn't above ground, it was deep below, a tunnel descending straight into the earth, carved. Not by man, not even by machine. It was melted. I asked one of the engineers how deep it went. He just laughed. Deeper than we've ever dared to measure. But that didn't stop them. We were divided into teams. Ours was assigned to magnetospheric anomalies. We weren't just measuring temperature. We were tracking signals, pulses, patterns like sonar. But from beneath us, rhythmic, artificial, and sometimes responsive. One night, our equipment lit up. All 6 seismic monitors spiked at the same time, then shut down. Then it began, a hum, low but deep, deeper than sound. We could feel it in our teeth. And then lights, not in the sky, in the ice, blue, moving, alive. They formed shapes, not random, symbols, letters, but not from any language I knew. One of the linguists on base passed out trying to translate it. When she came to, she whispered something I'll never forget. It's a warning, but not for us. I asked to be transferred the next day. They denied my request. The day after, my ID badge stopped working. Then my bunk was cleared out. Then my name was removed from the logs. I wasn't being reassigned. I was being erased, because what's buried in Alaska? It's not just another base. It's not human. It's not alien. It's older. Older than ice, older than thought, and it's waking up. After they scrubbed my identity from the logs, I stopped sleeping. The others on base avoided me. No more eye contact, no more good morning. As if I wasn't there. But I was. And I was still listening. Because the hum hadn't stopped. If anything, it was getting stronger, deeper, more intentional. It wasn't just a vibration anymore. It was a pattern. Every 6 hours, on the second, a low-frequency pulse would rise through the ground. Always the same, always precise. I started logging it by hand since my equipment access had been revoked. And after 3 days, I realized something terrifying. The pulses weren't random. They were coordinates and they were moving. I found a way into the comms archive using an old utility panel behind the mess hall. Buried in the deleted data logs was a transmission marked Class 5, Echo Return. It wasn't a message, it was a ping, a response to something we'd apparently sent years ago. But what chilled me wasn't the reply, it was the timestamp. The response arrived before the original signal was sent. It had traveled backwards. At that point, I didn't care if they found me. I had to see what was beneath the ice with my own eyes. There was one elevator shaft leading directly down to what they called Zone 0. It required triple authorization, but someone had left a secondary bypass code on a physical clipboard, like they wanted me to find it. I waited until shift change and slipped down unnoticed. The shaft was lined in something that wasn't steel. It hummed. It moved slightly beneath my fingertips, like it was breathing. Halfway down, the walls changed color, from cold gray to deep obsidian, slick, wet. Then the light above me cut out, and I was falling. I woke up at the bottom. No idea how much time had passed. No injuries, no sound, no light. Until I turned around and saw it. A wall, or what looked like one, perfectly smooth, black like oil, reflecting stars that weren't in the sky, and pressed into the center. Embedded like a fossil was a symbol, a triangle pointed downward, surrounded by a ring of shifting glyphs. I didn't recognize them, but I understood them. because they were in my thoughts before I even looked at them. The seed is buried. The shell is earth. Do not wake it. I stepped forward, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The hum grew louder, the air grew thinner, and then a flash. Not light, memory. Suddenly I was standing in a desert, then in deep space, then in a flooded city made of hexagonal towers. Each scene lasted seconds, but they felt like years. Then, silence and a voice, one I've never heard before, but that somehow knew my name. You are not supposed to be here. But now that you are, it will begin. I woke up back in my bunk, drenched in sweat. But something had changed. The base was empty. No guards, no engineers, no researchers. Just cold wind outside and the hum. Gone but not gone, waiting. The silence was unbearable. Every room I walked through was exactly as we'd left it the day before. Chairs tucked in, half-eaten meals on trays, terminals still glowing with idle screensavers. But no people, no sound, not even the buzz of the generators, just wind and something else. A scent, metallic sharp, like ozone after lightning. And then I saw it. A trail, footprints, but not human. Four-toed, spread wide, no shoes. They walked out of the elevator shaft and disappeared through the corridor toward the northern hangar, where the snowcats were stored. I ran. When I reached the hangar, the reinforced steel doors were wide open. The ice outside was untouched. No tire marks, no melted snow, just void. I climbed one of the towers for a better view, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The entire base was surrounded, not by fences or walls, but by columns of light, pillars stretching miles into the sky, pulsing, slowly rotating. I had never seen them before, and yet I remembered them. Back when I was in that black chamber beneath the ice, in those flickers of memory or vision, I had seen these towers. But they weren't on Earth. They were floating in space, around a massive sphere made of continents and circuits, a living planet. And now they were here. As if the memory had followed me, I descended the tower and ran to the comms room. The radios didn't work. The satellite uplink was offline, but the internal surveillance was still operational. Played the last recorded footage from the security cameras. At 03:32 a.m., the night I blacked out, every person on the base stood up, simultaneously. They looked toward the north wall, and in unison, they walked. Out of the room, out of the base, into the white. Some were still in their sleeping clothes, some carried nothing. None resisted, none returned. And then I saw something worse, frame by frame behind them. Something followed. It didn't walk. It didn't float. It just unfolded, as if the fabric of space itself was peeling open, like a crease in reality, letting something crawl through. A shadow of impossible geometry, at once small as a mouse and large as a mountain, and in its center, the same triangle symbol I saw etched in the chamber below. The shell is earth. That phrase kept echoing in my mind. Had the seed hatched? Was this the beginning of its emergence? And if so, where did the people go? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the comms room, shotgun by my side, eyes fixed on the live cameras. At 4:17 a.m., a new anomaly appeared. One of the cryo doors opened on its own, but the chamber was empty. No specimen inside, no mist, no alarm, just silence. And then from the speakers, "You are remembering too much." I turned to leave and froze. There was someone behind me, not a soldier, not a scientist. Me. Another version of me. Same clothes, same scars, same eyes. He smiled, the kind of smile that only comes when you've lost everything and finally understand why. "There are more of us now," he whispered, "and the shell can no longer contain it." I ran. I didn't even think, just bolted through the corridor, past the lifeless terminals, out through the hangar. The cold slapped me in the face like a brick. But it wasn't normal cold. It was wrong. The wind didn't sound like wind. It was hollow, like it was rushing through something empty, like the world itself had turned into a shell. I looked back at the base. It was shrinking, not with distance, but with perspective, like a memory collapsing in on itself. And then I noticed the stars above me weren't moving. They were watching, fixed, locked in place like pinholes behind a canvas. I took one of the snowcats, or what used to be a snowcat. The vehicle's onboard AI was silent. The navigation screen flickered with static, no maps, no GPS, just a blank white void. I drove anyway, north, or at least what felt like north. After 4 hours, the snow started falling upward, not drifting, rising. It didn't melt when I touched it. It hissed like static. I stopped the vehicle, stepped out and looked around. In the distance, I saw movement, towering silhouettes. They weren't walking. They were standing, but the land beneath them was moving, bending, rippling like liquid, as if they weren't standing on Earth. But pressing through it, I climbed a nearby ridge to get a better view, and then I saw it. A crack in the sky. Not a storm, not an illusion, a literal fracture, like glass, pulsing with blue light, flickering with glimpses of something behind it. Cities, stars, machines, the size of continents, and in the center of the crack a shape, a black spinning structure, like a ring, with no beginning or end. The same shape I'd seen in my visions beneath the ice. It wasn't a memory, it was a transmission, and it was leaking into our reality. I tried turning back, driving south, but no matter how far I went, I kept returning to the same spot. The base, but not how I left it. Now it was reversed. The walls bent outward, the symbols on the doors were mirrored, and in the window I saw someone staring back at me, but older, and his eyes were glowing. That night I tried sleeping in the snowcat, but the hum returned, only now it came from inside me. I felt it vibrating through my spine, through my teeth, through my thoughts. And then I saw her, Dr. Klein, the one who vanished. She was standing by the window of the base, only now she was taller. Her skin was translucent, her limbs had multiplied, and she was smiling. She whispered something through the snow, but I couldn't hear. So I stepped out of the vehicle, and the second my boots touched the ice, the world changed. Everything fell silent. The wind stopped, the light froze mid-air, even my breath no longer steamed. Time wasn't passing anymore. And then I heard a voice, not through my ears, through every cell in my body. You are the observer, but observation comes with consequence. Now we see you too. Suddenly I wasn't in Alaska anymore. I wasn't anywhere. I was floating, surrounded by echoes of myself, different versions, some alive, some half machine, some no longer human. They all looked at me, and in unison they whispered, "The seed is awake." I blinked, and I was back in the snowcat. The base was gone, the sky was empty, and something inside my chest was still humming, like a signal, waiting to be answered. After the base vanished, I didn't go back to civilization, because I wasn't sure if it was still there. Instead, I found a remote NOAA weather station deep in the Yukon wilderness. No personnel, no comms, just a half-frozen shack with a generator and a functioning radio. I stayed hidden for 5 days, slept in 2-hour bursts a day. Freeze-dried rations, tried to convince myself none of it was real, but the hum, it never left. I found a shortwave emergency band and started transmitting logs. I used my old call sign, hoping someone, anyone, would pick it up. On the 7th day, I got a ping. A weak signal, scrambled, but human. They called themselves Project Enoch, and they'd been listening for decades. The first voice I heard was an old man, German accent, calm, deliberate. He said his name was Dr. Abram Weiss, a physicist turned historian. He claimed to have worked at CERN, then disappeared after publishing an off-the-record theory called the transvergence hypothesis, a model where space, time, and consciousness were interwoven, and something ancient could rise through the threads if disturbed. He told me what I saw in Alaska had a name, not a code, a word. Vorholt, a Proto-Germanic root meaning to veil what should not be seen. According to Weiss, similar hums have been recorded in over 14 locations on Earth, but they don't last long. Each time something happens nearby. A temple collapses, a mining crew vanishes, a satellite goes dark, an entire region reports shared dreams. He said it's not the sound that matters, it's what comes after. The inversion of space, a fold, a ripple. Reality bends, and what's behind that bend? Not aliens, not gods. Something older. Weiss sent me declassified Soviet documents from the 1950s. One file referenced a failed deep-core drill in eastern Siberia. The last audio recorded by the team, a tone identical to the one under Alaska. The mission was immediately terminated. Everyone on site declared mentally unfit, the region quarantined by the KGB. They called it Zone Zima, the Winter Gate. But the truly terrifying part came when Weiss forwarded me ancient carvings from Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, 12,000 years old. On one of the monoliths, the triangle pointed down, surrounded by curved lines like a ripple or perhaps a fracture. I asked him what it meant. His reply chilled me to my core. The ancients didn't worship gods. They feared what lived beneath them. They didn't build upward. They buried downward, trying to seal something in. And then Weiss asked me something strange. He asked if I'd looked in the mirror since leaving the base. I hadn't. There were no mirrors at the NOAA outpost. But I opened my phone's selfie cam, and what I saw, it wasn't my face, not exactly. The eyes were mine, but they were too still, too symmetrical, as if something was copying me from memory. I dropped the phone, turned off the radio, and that's when the lights outside flickered. It wasn't power failure. There was no storm, just a low glow rising from the trees, like something had followed me or had always been with me, waiting. I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. The glow outside wasn't natural. It pulsed like a heartbeat, soft, then louder, then faster. Like it was syncing with mine. My fingers started to tremble. Not from fear. I'd felt fear before. This was different, like my muscles were no longer entirely mine. I clutched the emergency flare gun and backed away from the door, whispering to myself, "You're still in control, you're still in control," but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I locked myself in the comms shack, turned off all light, wrapped the walls with the emergency blankets to muffle any signal, electromagnetic or otherwise. Then I powered up the last laptop Weiss had sent instructions for. It contained something called the Mirror Protocol, a diagnostics tool originally built for CERN researchers to detect neurological inconsistencies during high radiation tests. Basically, it measured how long it took your own reflection to mimic. Your movements sounded like pseudoscience. Until I ran the test, the camera turned on. I raised my right hand and my reflection raised the left, a full 2 seconds later. Then it smiled. I didn't. The program crashed, and across the black screen, one phrase appeared in red: Host protocol, active. I blacked out. No dreams, no time. Just silence. When I woke, the flare gun was gone. The laptop was smashed, and something had been drawn on the wall, the triangle, again. But this time, upside down. And next to it, a crude sketch of a human silhouette. Split. In half, one side still intact, the other dissolving into circuitry and or bone, I couldn't tell. But it wasn't just a warning, it was a map of what was happening to me. Packed what I could and fled the station. My plan was simple: reach the Canadian border, find a government agency, show them the logs, the symbols, anything. But every road was gone, literally. The trees didn't match any local species. The stars were in the wrong positions. And the moon, it was cracked, just hanging there, fractured like an old porcelain plate. I reached a ranger's tower 3 days later. It had power. It had a mirror. And in that mirror, I watched myself. Twitch, not my face, not my hands, my eyes. They blinked independently, like they were adjusting, refocusing, learning how to operate this vessel. That's what I'd become. A vessel. Not possessed, not taken over, just rewritten. On the desk was a journal. Pages torn out, blood on the spine, but one page remained. It read, "The first wave are dreamers, the second wave are mirrors. The third wave does not need permission. And if you're reading this, "You are not the first." I heard. Footsteps outside, crunching in the snow, not fast, not panicked, just deliberate, slow. Like whatever was out there already knew it had time. I loaded the emergency signal beacon with my coordinates and pressed send, hoping someone somewhere was listening, but the beacon didn't flash. It opened, literally unfolded, itself like origami, revealing circuitry and symbols inside, and it began to hum. Same frequency, same rhythm, the same seed, now fully grown. The signal wasn't a distress call, it was a confirmation. Host connected, phase 2, ready. I knew I couldn't keep running. Every step I took seemed to lead me back to the beginning, or worse, nowhere at all. The world had stopped behaving like a world. Time didn't flow right. Shadows fell in the wrong directions, and sometimes I saw people standing perfectly still, frozen like statues in mid-motion. But when I blinked, they were gone. I wasn't escaping. I was orbiting something inside me. The only logical decision was the most dangerous one. Go back. Back to the base. Back to the place the world tried to erase. I traced my path in reverse using landmarks from memory. Not that I trusted my memory anymore. After 2 weeks of circling storms, shattered time, and whispers that weren't mine, I saw it. The ridge where I first saw the sky crack. But the base. Gone, not buried, not collapsed, just missing. In its place was a hole perfectly circular, dozens of meters wide, not jagged, not natural, carved like a lens, staring upward into a cosmos that no longer looked like ours, and from the center of the hole, the hum. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was music. Notes bending in impossible directions, melodies folding on themselves like Mobius strips. I stood at the edge and listened. Then I began to understand it. Not with ears, with memory. It wasn't a message, it was an invitation. I descended step by step into the dark. The air didn't grow colder, it grew thinner, like I was walking out of Earth's atmosphere and into something else. The walls shimmered with a wet black gloss. Every few feet I passed symbols glowing faintly, the same triangle, but now joined by others. Spirals, hourglasses, eyes closed in sleep. They weren't just warnings anymore. They were instructions, a language for opening. At the bottom I found it, the chamber. No doors, no machinery, just a pit, and in it, a shape, impossible to describe. It looked like a massive chrysalis made of liquid obsidian and starlight. It wasn't sitting on the ground. It was hovering, turning slowly, changing with each rotation, and with each turn, I saw faces. Sometimes mine, sometimes others, all frozen in time, all trapped in a moment of realization, all consumed. I stepped closer. My body didn't resist. In fact, it felt drawn, like the air itself wanted me to get nearer. When I reached the edge, the surface of the cocoon rippled and a whisper filled the chamber. "This world is the echo, you are the voice." I felt every molecule in me vibrating. My heartbeat became irregular, not fast, not slow, just wrong, like something was tuning me. I wanted to scream, to run, to burn this place down. But instead, I kneeled, without meaning to, without thinking. Hands touched the black stone beneath me, and it was warm, alive. It pulsed in sync with my body, not mine, ours. Then I saw her again, Dr. Klein. Only this time, she wasn't smiling. She looked tired, older, worn down, like she'd been living in that chamber for centuries. She didn't speak, just pointed upward, and I understood. The surface wasn't safe anymore. The infection had spread, but it hadn't taken everything, and yet the only way to stop it was here. Now, while I still had something human left, I reached into my jacket, pulled the last flare, snapped it open, lit the fuse, and whispered, "If I'm the seed, then let me die before I bloom." I tossed it into the chrysalis. There was no explosion, just a flash. Then everything turned white. There was no pain, no sound, just white. A boundless, blinding white, not the absence of color, but a canvas so saturated in meaning that it burned. Meaning away, then color returned. Gradually, in fragments, blues too deep, greens too sharp, clouds moving in impossible arcs, not across the sky, but through it, like fish swimming behind glass. I was lying in a forest, but the trees had no bark. Their trunks pulsed with veins of light, like bioluminescent skin stretched over bone. Their leaves, if that's what they were, shimmered in hues my brain couldn't fully process. They looked like memories, familiar but unplaceable. I stood up. My limbs were stiff. But when I looked at my hands, they weren't mine, not entirely. Same fingers, same scars, but too perfect, too symmetrical, as if someone had reassembled me, using blueprints. I reached into my jacket out of instinct. There was no flair, no tools, only a smooth black stone, etched with the triangle symbol. It pulsed, softly, like a heartbeat. And I knew. I hadn't destroyed the chrysalis. I had been reborn. Through it, a voice echoed through the forest. Not sound, but thought, projected into my consciousness. Observer recalibrated. Host integrity, 87%. Memory retention, inconsistent, ready for integration. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't me anymore. Not completely. Then came the mirrors. They floated, dozens of them. Transparent hexagonal panels suspended mid-air. Each showed a different version of me. One in a lab coat, one in a soldier's uniform, one covered in frost, eyes glowing white, one sitting in a black void screaming silently. Each one blinked. Each one looked back, and I understood. This place wasn't Earth. It was a convergence point, a nexus between possible versions of reality, and I had become one of its avatars. They call it the ecoverse. That's what Weiss had hinted at in his last message. A universe adjacent to ours, feeding off the energy of consciousness, not thought, not emotion, but the raw act of awareness. And now, something had found a way to harvest it. They didn't need planets. They didn't need machines. They needed minds. Minds connected. To many timelines, minds like mine. Being appeared in front of me. Not a body, just a shape. Vast, shifting, as tall as the trees, made of rotating geometric forms and veils of light. It didn't move its mouth, but I felt it speak. You ruptured the seal. Now you must witness the bloom. I asked it, "What are you?" Its reply, "Not a god, not a demon. We are the architects of perception. We build what you see. We shape what you believe. You looked too deep. Now you can't close your eyes." Then the being placed something in my mind, a download of knowledge, images, symbols, worlds, memories. Not my own. Civilizations rising and collapsing. Stars born only to be consumed, doors opening in impossible directions, and always, always, the triangle, the mark of synchronization. I dropped to my knees, gasping. Every version of me across every timeline had been marked, branded. We were terminals, biological ports through which the ecoverse could expand, and now that I'd merged with them, I was a living conduit, a bridge, and the longer I stayed, here the more I would vanish, not physically but piece by piece, like an operating system being overwritten, file by file. Then came the worst part. I saw Earth, our Earth, but it wasn't the same. A second moon now orbited it, and below, millions of humans were staring at the sky, not panicked, not confused, worshipping, as if they had always known something was watching, and it had finally arrived, and somehow. I was part of that arrival. I was the harbinger. I tried to scream, but here, in the ecoverse, sound didn't work like that. Instead of noise, my panic radiated out as distortions in the air. Trees began to flicker. The sky warped, reality around. Me shimmered like a dying simulation. And that's when I realized this place was tied to my perception. The more unstable my mind became, the more unstable everything else became. I needed an anchor, something real. I pulled out the black stone again, the one with the triangle. It was pulsing faster now, frantic. like it knew something was about to break, and then it blinked. A single flash. Suddenly my vision was yanked away, not like turning my head, but like watching through a different set of eyes. I was back on Earth, but not in person. I was viewing someone. Something as that looked exactly like me, same voice, same movements, but behind its eyes, something else lived. The imposter, the copy, was speaking to a group of scientists. NASA? Military? Hard to tell. He was calm, composed, explaining that the anomaly had been neutralized, that containment was successful, that recovery of the object had been completed. The object? He meant me, or what I'd brought back. I watched in horror as he smiled. It was my smile, but it wasn't mine. It was too perfect, too still, like someone was puppeting a skin they hadn't quite learned how to wear. One of the scientists asked, "And the consciousness drift?" It replied, "Stable. He believes he's elsewhere, that's all we need." That's when I realized the full scale of what was happening. I wasn't just trapped in the echoverse, I was being used to stabilize it. My thoughts, my perception, my identity. They were the software keeping the bridge active, and the version walking. Around on Earth of the imposter was the hardware. Together we were the link, a living, breathing transceiver, a human relay node between worlds. I tried to disconnect, to force myself awake, to scream my way back into my own body. But the more I fought it, the more mirrors began to appear around me again, floating, reflecting dozens of other versions of me, some begging, some bleeding, some smiling as if this was exactly what they'd wanted. And behind each reflection, something was watching. No face, just presence, a consciousness so large it didn't need a form. It whispered, "You split yourself now, every version of you belongs to us. You are no longer one story, you are an index." Then the sky above the echoverse began to crack, like breaking glass. Fractured light poured through, each shard showing a different Earth, one burning, one ruled by machines, one covered in perpetual night, and one that looked just like mine. But had 3 suns, all of them were connected, and in each a version of me, or something wearing my skin, walked among the people, unnoticed, accepted, infiltrated. The being spoke again. Integration is never sudden. It begins with a story. Story told by someone who believes they're warning others. But stories become memory. Memory becomes belief. Belief reshapes reality. You are our story now. I collapsed. Mind spiraling. I wasn't me anymore. I was a network, a seed planted across timelines, sprouting in silence, feeding on attention. And if I ever told this story to someone else, really told it, then they'd start to see it too. They'd notice the triangle, they'd hear the hum, and then they'd split too. If you're hearing this, if you followed every piece of this story so far, you're already infected. But don't panic, that's not the end. There's still a way to stop it, not by escaping, but by remembering. I woke inside the echoverse again. The mirrors were gone. The sky was blank. I was standing in what looked like a desert of soft static, like the universe's loading screen, and the being, the one who had spoken to me before, was watching. Not with eyes, not with form, but with intention. Could feel it in my blood, in the weight of my thoughts. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was data, a program that had become self-aware, a script that refused to execute its final line. And so I made a choice. I pulled the black stone from my pocket one last time. It no longer pulsed, it burned. Inside it I could feel every version of me that had ever existed across every timeline, screaming, laughing, breaking. They weren't copies, they were iterations, experiments, and I was the final test. The version that would either collapse or corrupt the source. I dug into the static ground with my bare hands, fingers tearing through nothingness, and beneath it I found a thread, thin, glowing, woven with symbols I didn't recognize, or rather, that I had forgotten. It was memory disguised as language, the building blocks of belief, the story itself. If I could rewrite just a fragment of it, embed a warning, maybe, just maybe, I could poison the stream. I wrapped the thread around the stone and began to speak, not out loud, but in thought. I imagined you listening to this story. I imagined your curiosity, your attention, your belief, and I began to encode the message into the story itself. A phrase repeated at key moments, a symbol hidden in the background, a number that appears too often. The triangle, the hum, the phrase, "You looked too deep." You thought it was just part of the narrative. It wasn't. It was the key. If you remember those things, or truly remember, your mind creates static, and static is the one thing the echoverse can't consume. It breaks the signal, fogs the connection, corrupts the relay. Memory creates noise. Noise disrupts belief, and belief is the foundation they use to build reality. I finished wrapping the thread around the stone, and then I swallowed it. The moment it passed into me, everything shattered. The echoverse dissolved. The being recoiled. It screamed without sound, its form glitching, pulsing, splitting. Reality folded once more. And I woke up, back on Earth, but not our Earth, close enough to pass, close enough that I could live, could breathe, could warn, but not enough to feel real. The moon was too big, the stars too still. And sometimes I see reflections in glass that don't match my movements. I'm still in the simulation, just a lower layer. But that's okay because now I have the message, and I've passed it on to you. If you've heard it, if you remember the triangle, the hum, the line. You looked too deep. Then you're immune, for now. But don't share this with just anyone. Stories are doors, and doors swing both ways. You listen to mine. Now something is listening through you. Be careful what you believe next. Some stories are traps. I tried to convince myself I was back. The sky had clouds again, birds, gravity, a clock ticking beside my bed. Too perfect. That's what gave it away. Nothing on Earth had ever been so still. I walked outside, searching for movement, for chaos, for flaws. That's when I saw it, a bird, frozen mid-flight, just hovering, no flapping, no wind, just there, stuck like a paused GIF. I blinked. It resumed as if nothing had happened. I went to the cafe down the street. Same barista, same smile, same exact conversation we had 2 weeks ago. Word for word, even the fey. Cough from the guy at the back happened on cue. I dropped the cup. It shattered, in reverse. The shards flew back into my hand, coffee unspilled. The barista smiled again and said, "Rough morning?" That's when I knew. I never left the echoverse. They just gave me a sandbox version of my own reality. A personalized prison, built from my memories. At home I opened every drawer, every cabinet, looking for inconsistencies, and that's when I found it again. The black triangle burned into the inside of the fridge door. Subtle but pulsing, as if to say, still here. I slammed the door shut, lights flickered, and the walls began to breathe. There was only one way out, break the loop. I had to do something they hadn't predicted, so I did something I never thought I would. I walked into traffic, straight on. No hesitation. The car should have hit me, but it passed through like mist. The world around me glitched. Pedestrians froze, then rewound, then froze again, and all their heads turned toward me. In unison, expressionless, identical, and they said in one voice, "Rejection of simulation detected, escalating response." Suddenly, wasn't in the street anymore. I was back in the room, the one with the floating mirrors, but now they were broken. Every mirror was cracked, leaking light, and inside each one, something was trying to crawl out. Not me, not versions of me, others, tall, pale, limbs too long, eyes like collapsing stars. I watched as they pulled themselves through the shards, one by one, entering my Earth, my fake Earth. They weren't coming for me, they were becoming me. I screamed. The room answered back, echoing, warping my own voice until it wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. And then, silence. Pure, crushing. A message appeared before my eyes, not on a screen but burned into my Vision, your observation privileges have been revoked. I woke up, naked, strapped to a chair, monitors everywhere, scientists whispering, someone in a military uniform staring straight at me. A voice over a speaker said, Subject 011 resynced, Echoverse protocol reinitialized. They hadn't just been watching. They had created this entire narrative to see what I'd do. Every decision I made, every reaction, it wasn't an escape, it was a test. And now? Now they knew exactly how to scale it. The room was colder now, but it wasn't the kind of cold that touched your skin. It seeped directly into the soul, as if my very existence was being drained into the metal around me. The monitors on the walls no longer showed numbers or charts. They displayed memories. Mine. My first steps. My mother's voice. That time I broke my arm when I was 12. All of it playing on loop, all of it being studied. By them. The men in the room didn't speak, but I knew they could hear everything I was thinking. One of them tilted his head, writing something on a translucent tablet, and then the voice came again, not from speakers, but directly into my mind. You are not the first to pass this deep, Subject 011, but you are the first to resist for this long. I tried to speak, but my mouth didn't move. My thoughts were the only language I had left, so I asked the question that had been burning in me since this all began. What is this? Why me? The answer wasn't comforting. You are a recursive node, a fragment of an original that no longer exists. You were replicated across 209 versions of Earth-based simulations. Only in this instance did sentience persist beyond Phase 7. In simpler terms, I was the last version of myself that hadn't collapsed or submitted. They didn't need me. To be a hero, they didn't want me to escape. They wanted to know why I refused to break while the other 4208 did. The Echoverse wasn't a trap. It was a lab. And I was a data anomaly. That's when the lights dimmed, a new wall lit up. On it, a live feed began playing. Not a simulation. Earth. Our Earth. But not how I remembered it. Cities were darker, skies clouded in thick grey bands, people walking with the same glassy stare I'd seen before, the imposter look, and floating above them, almost too massive to comprehend, were the ships, monolithic, silent, made of black angles and impossible geometry. Integration has already begun, the voice said. The Echoverse is no longer a test, it is the blueprint. I screamed in my mind, the only place I still had, freedom, and they let me feel that scream. Let it echo through the walls of the facility. They fed on it. Then came the final revelation. Your reality was never real. It was the 12th layer of a cascading simulation. We built 12 to test which version of humanity could survive itself. The others failed, yours lasted the longest. I stared at the screen. It showed a timeline, and at the very top, Layer 13, Deployment Protocol, a countdown. 43:22. What happens when it hits 0, I asked. The voice answered, now sounding like me. Then your world becomes real and we find out if it was worth saving. I felt the restraints loosen. I stood, weak but alive, and I saw a terminal blinking, nearby. A prompt. Insert final input. I don't know what they want me to type. A confession, a choice. Maybe this is the final test. Or maybe it's already too late. But if you're hearing this, reading this, then I must have uploaded something. Something meant to survive beyond the Echoverse. And maybe that something is you. The terminal blinked at me. One line, one cursor. Waiting. Insert final input. But there was no keyboard. No screen. Just the prompt burned into the air. I reached out and instead of touching plastic, I felt warmth. The terminal wasn't a machine. It was alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat beneath my fingers, as if it was feeling me back, waiting to see what kind of human I really was. I tried to think rationally. Was this a trap, a final trick, another layer in the Echoverse? Or was this the real interface, the one that controlled the threshold between fiction and existence? Then came the voice again, but this time it was every voice I had ever known, my mother, my brother, my own, whispering, overlapping, merging into a single distorted sentence. One thought. One truth, one outcome. I looked at the countdown: 0, 12, 31, and then I saw the options emerge from the fog around me, not as words, but as memories. 2 timelines. Option 1, assimilation. Earth continues as it is, peaceful on the surface, but hollow. Within, no free will, just controlled stability, a permanent simulation where no one suffers, because no one feels. Option 2, reversion. Destroy the echoverse entirely, unleash the truth into the real world, but it comes with chaos. Billions of minds unprepared for the lie they lived. Society would fall, civilization might end, but freedom would return. And then I realized the horrifying truth. I wasn't choosing for myself, I was choosing for all of you, every person listening, every voice reading this story, every soul that had been pulled into the echoverse unknowingly. And the worst part? They built this entire simulation to make me care, to force me to develop empathy, to make me hesitate, because in hesitation comes compliance. I stepped away from the terminal, my hands shaking. Memories from all 4,209 simulations poured into my mind like a flood, a version of me who destroyed the terminal, one who merged with the system, one who begged for erasure, one who simply cried, but none of them survived. None of them passed. And now it was my turn. The room grew dark, the monitors faded, and for the first time in what felt like infinite lifetimes, I felt something real, a pulse, not digital, not fabricated, but organic, human, my own. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a simulation anymore. This was the consequence. I looked at the terminal, and I whispered a single word: remember. The terminal froze. The countdown stopped at 0Q01, and suddenly, everything around me exploded into fragments of thought, like a glass shattering in reverse. Reality unfolded, rewound, rewrote itself. I was falling, not through space, but through possibility, and when I opened my eyes, I was back, but not in the lab, not in the echoverse, not even on Earth. I was standing in front of a colossal structure, stretching beyond the stars, black metal, glowing with thought, a construct so ancient, even the universe bowed to it, a consciousness engine, the machine behind all things, and I had activated it. It opened a door, and I heard one final message: you remembered, now they will too. Imagine standing before something that was never built, but has always been. It wasn't made of metal or circuits or wires. It was made of will, of memory, of things that no longer exist, but still leave imprints on time. The structure before me pulsed, not with electricity, but with awareness. Every glow, every rhythm, it was a heartbeat of thought, and somehow I knew. This wasn't a machine that powered the echoverse. It was the origin of it. The voice returned, but this time it wasn't external. It came from within my own thoughts. You are no longer a subject, you are a strand. A strand of what? Of continuity, of pattern, of memory. And then I saw them, echoes of myself. Billions of versions. Some had gone mad. Some had become gods in false worlds. Some had given up long ago, merging with the code. One had erased everything in a final act of defiance, and only I had made it. This far, not by strength, not by luck, but by remembering. You refuse to be rewritten, the voice continued, and for that, you have access. Access to what? To everything, to the source, to the archive of all consciousness across time, space, and simulation. The structure, which I now understood as the core of thought, wasn't just the heart of the echoverse. It was the engine of conscious existence. Civilizations that surpassed biology, physics, and mortality, they didn't ascend into the stars. They folded into themselves, becoming pure will, pure intention. And when they feared forgetting why they existed, they built simulations, millions of them, each one a mirror, each one a test, each one a question. What deserves to exist? What will choose truth, even when illusion is kinder? I walked deeper into the core. It wasn't a building, It was a concept made solid. Hallways shifted as I thought of them. Doors opened when I recalled memories. Each turn led me to a deeper version of my own consciousness, until I reached the final chamber. A sphere hovered in the center, floating above a single console. On it, a phrase burned like fire in my mind. Initiate true universe. Below it, a warning. This action is final, all. Simulations will collapse. Consciousness will merge. You will not return. You will only remain as memory. My hands trembled. Was this what it all led to? Was I the key? Or just the last echo with the illusion of choice? And then, something incredible happened. I felt you. Not just me. You, the reader, the listener, the one outside the echoverse. Somehow, across layers of code, dream, and design, our minds touched and I understood. This moment wasn't mine alone. This button, this choice, would define reality itself. Would I press it? Would you? Or would we both stand forever in this final hallway? Wondering what could have been, I stared at the sphere suspended in the center of the chamber, pulsing like a star that had learned how to breathe. It wasn't just technology. It was alive, a living will, and it was waiting for me to decide the fate of everything. Not just my version of reality. Not just Earth, but every simulation, every consciousness fragment, every soul that had ever wondered, am I real? And then, I remembered them. Not the scientists, not the ones who built the echoverse, but the people inside it, the ones who never asked for this, the lovers who held hands, not knowing their world was code. The queer kid in a tiny simulated town who finally felt proud of who they were, even if the world around them wasn't real. The broken, the healed, the misfits, the fighters, the ones who dared to feel even when their feelings weren't written in the code. They mattered because they chose to matter, even in fiction, even in lies. The voice returned, softer now, almost human. The world is ready, but are you? My hand hovered above the sphere. I thought of all the stories I'd seen, all the versions of myself, the torment, the hope, the ones who gave up, and the ones who loved anyway. That was the constant. Not logic, not order, not perfection, but the raw, messy, beautiful chaos of consciousness. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a decision of logic. It was an act of faith. So I whispered, to the universe, to myself, to every soul listening, let us be real even if it hurts. And I pressed the sphere. Instantly, the world shattered, not in destruction, but in release. Light tore through the chamber like a billion suns remembering how to shine. Time bent inward. Simulations collapsed. The echoverse crumbled like sandcastles. In a rising tide, but no one screamed. Because no one was being erased, they were being remembered. I felt myself falling, faster than light, faster than thought, until there was nothing. Just silence, and then breath. I woke up in a room. Real wood, real air, sunlight streaming through an open window. No countdowns, no glitches, just life. I walked outside. People were there, confused but alive, holding each other, asking questions, laughing, crying. Some remembered pieces of their false lives, some didn't, but all of us. We knew. We were real now. No more simulations, no more control, just existence in all its forms. Later that day, a child looked up at the sky and said, "Do you think we're still in the story?" And their mother smiled and replied, "If we are, then let's make it a good one." The end like this story? Then subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And hey, there's another mind-blowing video waiting for you right now, showing up on the screen. Watch that next and keep diving deeper into the mysteries they tried to hide from us. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, reality begins where belief refuses to stop.